Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor. I'm the man on the Silver Mountain, and welcome back. Now, I've had a few, one of the most popular videos on the channel at the moment, or to date, in fact. It's been up there in the top 10 for a while. Was the speculation that I did on the first two Death Stranding trailers, and there's a part of this game that very much interests me, considering that I've talked a fair amount on the channel about learning through games and evolution and development through games, and how you've got Kojima Productions' mascot, which is Homo Ludens, and how there are elements of Kojima's philosophy and interests in that kind of perspective, kind of present in this game. And how before I started talking about how Mads Mikkelsen's character is seems to me to be some kind of game dev, and the various tendrils that we've seen are almost their way of his way and his associates' way of reprogramming the world, and all of that kind of thing, and how it's all very interestingly connected and worked with, and I'm going to kind of get into this trailer as well, the third kind of cinematic teaser trailer that came out last year, where initially when people have commented about this on that previous video and stuff, I've said, yeah, well, I would like to do more on this. But we've not got a lot of information. I was kind of mulling over whether or not to do one on this trailer, and I thought, oh, well, maybe we'll get another trailer or something else later on. But as we've heard an awful lot about, or at least a fair number of rumours, like later this year, E3 time, we might start seeing our first actual gameplay of Death Stranding and seeing more of that. I kind of wanted to take a look at this trailer now, because if those prove true, then maybe some of the theories, some of the speculation, some of the things that I'm picking up on in these trailers may be proved false, may be proved incorrect. And I've got a little bit of tangential information around kind of this from what certain people have said. Most prominently, I think it was Norman Reedus who mentioned that there are going to be elements of social media involved in the game, and I think that might be something that we see in this most recent trailer. So without further ado, I'm thinking that we might that we'll watch it, and as we watch it, I'll pause it every so often to comment on stuff and try and highlight some things. So I'm sorry if you've not seen the trailer. I'll actually link the actual trailer itself in full down in the description, so you can go and just pause this video right now, go and watch the whole trailer by yourself and see what you think, and then come back and we can discuss. So 3, 2, 1. Okay, so now that you've gone and you've watched the trailer, let's take a look at this again.
Once there was an explosion, a bang which gave birth to time and space. Once there was an explosion, a bang which set a planet spinning in that space. Once there was an explosion, a bang which gave rise to life as we know it. And then came the next explosion.
Okay, so far we're hearing him talk about the three explosions, and these are fairly straightforward in regards to what they actually are. We've got the explosion, the Big Bang that caused the universe to one extent or another, depending on which actual theory you ascribe to in full. But either way, there was a Big Bang of some sort, and it allowed, at the very least, the space in which we live at the moment. Then you've got the next Big Bang, where he says that it caused the planet to start spinning in that space. This is going to be the either the creation of a sun as dust and particulates in the void kind of collected up and ignited, but then also obviously we've got the the various other explosions on a celestial level that have happened since then. We had another large planetoid collide directly with Earth at one point, which then the remnants of which became the moon, which I believe is called Moloch. I can never remember. I believe that's what the name of the celestial body was. But either way, it could be that counted as that. Either way, big celestial thing in the past that caused our planet to start interacting with the rest of the universe the way it does. Then we've got the explosion of life, which I think is the Cambrian explosion or something like that, where you've got the sudden development and swell of multicellular organisms and their variety expanding hugely, and then going on to then inform all evolution and growth on the planet as a whole. And then he says about the fourth explosion, which is seemingly the events of the game. But the thing that stands out to me in this first section that we just saw was that there seems to be the rain falling, and there seems to be an event about to happen. And we've been told that the rain has time-altering effects, but in regards to actually impacting stuff. So we'll see some more of this in a minute, but the rain is falling. We've got our Norman Reedus character, Sam, who's lying here in the mud, but plants go through their life cycle of growing and dying and growing and dying and growing and dying, but they never actually fully die out, as long as they've got somewhere to root and to grow from. And that's what we're seeing at the beginning here. We've got these plants that are growing because the time is being accelerated in some way. The effects of time as a result of the rain interacting with them are being moved on. And we see some more of this later on, and I want to make a connection about the rain and water and stuff like that later on. But what we're seeing is, like, if I just jump back a little bit,
that space,
like here we are.
There was
let me knock the volume down a little again. We're seeing it grow and then die, and then grow again,
and then came the next
and die, and then it starts to just die towards that part. But anyway, let's carry on. So here we've got Norman Reedus. Apparently something bad has happened. He's been knocked on the ground. Thankfully, he's covered by his suit, so he's not in too much trouble. But here we've got his name, seemingly. So we know his name is Sam because he's referred to as Sam in a minute. But we've either got this is his second name as Sam Porter, or this is his job, i.e. he is a porter. He's carrying from point A to point B, and we can't really tell between which one of those two things it is at the moment. Now, here we've got... So I can't tell what that is, but we've got this bagged up corpse here, and then we've got seemingly, possibly, I can't tell if that's another vehicle, but we've definitely got this vehicle over here, and it's, something has obviously gone wrong. So now we've got a few other things going on right now. The thing that stands out to me, though, is the individual that we'll see in a minute over here can't really too easily be seen at the moment. So there's that, but then there's this other chap with this weird armature sticking off him, which we'll see some more of in a sec. So again, Porter on his leg, which the fact that it's on his uniform like that, not just on his arm, makes me think that it's not his name. It's his job. This is his uniform. It's his job. It's the description of what he is. Because that way, if you're walking through a loading dock, for instance, or a place where there's an awful lot of activity, you want to be able to know who people are potentially straight away. So having names and things like that on a uniform, positions, stuff on back of a high-vis jacket saying supervisor or something like that, makes sense. So again, having this written so large on his leg. If it was just his shoulder, I could maybe go, yeah, it's his name on his uniform. The fact it's on his leg makes me think he's transporting something. He is moving something from point A to point B. And now here we have... random phone call. Now here we have this... this... what do you call it? Dreamcatcher. That's what they are. But the thing that stands out to me is that it's got this little gold piece of metal in it. And I feel like that's significant. And we'll see why in a moment. So this corpse... because it's definitely a corpse. It's wrapped up seemingly in what is essentially a body bag and so on. It's all tied up with what look to be kind of bungee cords to one extent or another. And then it's got this gold kind of skull face mask thing that's held in place by black sludge. Now, I feel that this corpse is what Sam here was the porter of. I feel like this is what he was transporting. Why? Because it's what he first goes to check on. He can see that there are people over there in the distance who have also been injured. The vehicle's been taken out. But the first thing he comes to check on is his cargo, the thing that he is in charge of. And so he's come over and he's taken a look at this. Now, I think that this thing is the same type of thing as Mads Mikkelsen's character. And I'll get on to why in a little bit.
Shit, they're here.
Okay, so we've got one guy who's trapped underneath this vehicle. It seems like he was just obscured from that first shot. But then we've got this armature, which seems to be responding to some kind of sensory data that it can pick up as a result of, if we just jump back a little bit, this black bulb here contains the baby that we've seen in other trailers. Now, the other thing that we pan over here is that these guys work for Bridges. That was the company pin that Guillermo del Toro had on him prior. But also they've got another patch on their other shoulder, which we'll see more of in a minute. But I have a feeling that Bridges might be a government organisation more so than anything else. And we'll get on to why later when we see the other patch. But so this armature, though, seems to be responding to the fact that the child is attached to it. And we'll see some more of that as we go along, which then starts us asking questions about Guillermo's character later on. Okay, so here we're seeing him aging as a result of the rain interacting with him. So the rain, it seems to be the water in this game promotes the forward passage of time. Or at the very least, the water that happens during these events seems to promote the forward passage of time. Which makes me think that there may very well be some time travel elements to this game. But not backwards, only ever forwards, only ever in a way that we can already predict with some of the equations and some of the other information that we have at our disposal in the real world, but also some of those equations and things like that were present on the necklace that Norman Reedus' character was wearing in the first trailer where he was walking around in the buff. Okay, so he yells across and calls him Sam, and he's obviously still tending to whatever it is, but these guys seem to be some kind of operatives. They seem to work for Bridges. They seem to, if I'm right, and Bridges is a government organisation, then they're essentially government agents of one description or another. and yet they're deferring to the porter, the person who is kind of carrying and ensuring that this piece of cargo gets from point A to point B. And then on top of that, they don't seem to know what's going to happen next, but he does. So the player is going to be some kind of specialist. Yeah, if we're playing Norman Reedus, as it were, or if we're jumping into Norman Reedus as a character for us to kind of live through, then it's going to be kind of interesting to see. Because again, we're going to be the expert. We're going to be going through all of it. We're going to be, if you think of movies like Arrival, the hero isn't the government agents. It's the person that just happens to be someone who comes across some stuff that then allows them to be better qualified. And I feel like that's the kind of angle that Norman's character, Sam here, is going to end up filling, rather than, even though they've said it's going to be kind of a third-person kind of action-y affair, I have a feeling that we're still going to end up in more of that intellectual hero space, maybe more so than anything else.
Don't even breathe.
Okay, so again, this is where I'm going to start the bigger speculation, and obviously, it's speculation. I don't know any better than anyone else, but I feel like I've got a couple of interesting theories that I've not come across anywhere else other than the video that I did before. So the armature, obviously, as we've already said, some kind of sensory equipment, picks up the whatever this creature is, and this creature is leaving the same impressions that we saw Norman Reedus' character leave on the second trailer when he was moving around with the baby. So I'm thinking, and this is the big speculation, that then later on in the trailer there's some more stuff to support these ideas. I'm thinking that what's happening is that the some of the creatures that we've seen before, including potentially Mads Mikkelsen's character, and the other thing that's over there with the grey mask, and the big people floating in the sky, which again we'll also see in this trailer in a minute, I feel like they are game developers. I feel like they are here to play, to develop, to test, to connect things, rewrite things, work with things, to change the environment. And I feel like they're doing this across multiple different realities, multiple different places. And I feel that the interaction between the players, because we are the players, the way we interact with the game is through our hands, the imprints that cross over are the imprints that we're leaving as players controlling characters, not the imprints that are being left by the developers or the random characters in the game. So they're surrounded, apparently, and they need to try and hide their presence from other players within this game space. And this is, again, where I feel like there's going to be some of the social media elements that Norman Reedus mentioned, because if you're having to both potentially inform other players at times, avoid invasions from other players at times, a la Dark Souls, and then also have to hide your presence in moment-to-moment play from other players that may very well have been kind of matched across a kind of secondary instance, if you like, then that makes potentially for some very interesting experiences, which again, I wouldn't put past Kojima causing. But I also feel like there are going to be, if we've got the people in the sky, including seemingly Mads Mikkelsen, who's seemingly an antagonist, but we don't know how or why yet. I'm thinking that we're going to see this stratification between developers, player-controlled players, i.e. people controlling Sam in their own instance that then interacts with other instances. And then some NPC players, in inverted commas, that will be there specifically to test us, but we won't necessarily be able to tell if it's a player or an actual player or a not player. And I feel like that's maybe what we're going to see. I think we're potentially going to see this stratification between sides, and where it might even become more of a situation whereby we're being tested to achieve enlightenment, and we're actually seeing these trailers in reverse. And by that I mean, here this is potentially quite early on. Then you jump forward, and you've got Guillermo del Toro's likeness carrying the baby and potentially being controlled because of the lobotomy scar. And he's moving through the area where Norman Reedus has just found enlightenment. He is no longer a part of the game world that they can interfere with, that they can interact with. Why? Well, because he's not connected by an umbilical anymore. He's set free. And also, in every other instance that we see the baby is in its container. But the one time that we see it with Norman, when he's disconnected from an umbilical, there's no casing for the child. And I feel like that the baby has its own very special instance, which we'll get into in a minute. Okay, so an important thing just to note there is that the armature seems to react more to proximity and direction. Almost as if by connection to the baby, you are able to see some of these interdimensional elements. Which means that when Guillermo del Toro connects himself to the child, but he doesn't have an armature, he doesn't have a suit, potentially the way that he looks straight at the camera when we see that connection is him looking not just ahead, but he's aligning with the baby's perception of the universe, and as a result he's able to see through the boundaries. He's able to see potentially Norman Reedus' character, Sam, stood across from him as Sam gets up and the baby is taken away. He is able to see the effects that Mads Mikkelsen's character, as again seemingly someone who's not connected to an umbilical, but who can connect his umbilicals to others to control them, as a developer would, with connections being made through a piece of game development software. I'm thinking that that's where we're going to see some of this stuff come about, and some of the themes of kind of interdimensional mumbo jumbo going on. Okay, so not only, the one thing I want to mention here before we see the next thing is, not only do we have the rain getting worse, but also we've got lightning in the background. Now, lightning is discharges of huge amounts of energy. And we see another instance in a minute of something conveying a very large amount of energy. And I feel like this is going to be something to look out for in interactions between the different worlds. Whether I'm right in saying that it's going to have interactions between players or not, I'm thinking that watching out for lightning, heat changes and things like that are also going to be particularly important in our surroundings, to see what the next set of effects are going to be that we might have to deal with. I think there's going to be a lot of environmental awareness, in the same way that in some of Kojima's previous games, some of the Metal Gear Solid games, your situational awareness for stealth purposes and so on and so forth are just as important as just your straight ability to aim. But anyway. So this thing, whatever it is, that is connected to the universe, I actually think that this might be Mads Mikkelsen's character. I think that as a result of the event that is about to start happening, where developers are coming in, where things are starting to change, I think that this is Mads Mikkelsen's character, his avatar within the experience, respawning. Because again, he sinks into the water, the black water, I might add, and disapparates entirely, and the golden mask fades and floats away. So here, you can just about see this outline of this huge creature, seemingly quite womanly hips, I'll give it that, but also look at the hands, all of these umbilicals, all of them hanging off this huge creature. And again, I feel like this is a developer. I feel like this is what I'm now going to term a developer, because it's the one controlling the scenario. It's closing in on the situation, but it's not directly interfering with it. We're not seeing any of these big creatures directly interfering with anything by default. They are here to observe and mess around with, and that's it. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of what role these guys actually play, because there's one that does have an interaction of a sort, and when we get to that point, I want to discuss that a bit further. Okay, so here we've got, apparently this developer has just shifted into a different form from the one it was in before. It was this towering, almost womanly figure, and now it's closing in on Sam. Whether or not we know that it's seen Sam or can sense Sam directly seems a little off, but the thing that interests me is we've got it giving off a huge amount of energy. It is heating up and almost burning and causing like steam to rise from this area near Sam as it approaches. Now, whether or not that's the because we've seen the handprints, so whether or not that's just the impression that it's leaving, and then this is the impression of something it is bringing with it, I can't really say. But it's interesting to note that again, energy transfer is something that's apparent here in the interactions between the developers, the other creatures moving through the space, and what's being perceived by, in theory, who will be playing. But they can hear, and again, realise how close it had to get, and how unobstructed it had to get before the armature started giving off sound. Okay, so again, we've got another one over there, but this time with no umbilicals that we can see. Huge creature floating in the storm around the outside, but without anything attached to it at the moment. And then there's another one, also seemingly without any connections at this time, and it seems like potentially they've been called over to deal with this other. But again, whether or not that's because they are following other players and observing, or whether that's because they are now shifting into a different avatar form to stretch across this boundary, is anyone's guess. So again, the black water seems to be a transmission fluid, and this is something that I touched on in my previous video on Death Stranding and speculation on it, whereby the kind of black fluid or the oil, the water, which it seems to be water as we move on, seems to be some kind of transmission fluid where it might not always be purely black, but in this particular situation it is, and you have people then being able to reach through, as per this arm that's reached through to grab this poor sod's chest, to drag him under and through and take him away for whatever purposes. Again, though, one of the things that was mentioned before, we've got the bracelets on these guys, whereby it seems like these might be health meters, or like negative effect meters, or something like that. But why they were a handcuff in regards to Guillermo and Norman Reedus' character in the prior trailers is, again, kind of uncertain at this time, because we don't know. Okay, so the first thing that's interesting here, though, is that they're not interested in dead things. He's being dragged away and dragged away and dragged away. As soon as he gets shot in the head, as soon as he's killed, they stop dragging him. He stops moving, and they seem to disperse to the extent that maybe it's the sound of the gun that caused them to disperse or whatever else, but the armature stops having a little freak out as well. Enter the respawned Mads Mikkelsen's character with a finger over his mouth, trying to make sure that they remain quiet. He's seemingly wearing similar gear to the rest of them, but he's just fallen out of the sky. So I think he's the developer that's been assigned to whichever reality we actually find ourselves playing in. He's going to be like our main point of contact, and he seems to be following us or interacting with us. So the fact he's been mentioned as an antagonist, but also Mads has said, yeah, well, he's also kind of a complicated character. So yeah, he's a bad guy because he's one of the ones that's interacting with this environment. He's interacting with the universe in a way that isn't exactly favourable. But at the same time, he's trying to help our Norman, our Sam, towards whatever goal. And the thing, once he... So there, we see him not only make the same kind of gesture that we see him make in the second trailer, in regards to directing his minions, but also he's wearing the gold skull mask with the black surrounding it. So I feel like this is where we have seen the corpse that disappeared respawn. And as a result of the way that it moves, the way that it's acting, I have a feeling it's Mads Mikkelsen's character. See, now, that was hard to spot, because this is the first time we see the baby here, and if you take a look at the kind of top left kind of quadrant, or top left side of its head, the head seems to ripple more than just water or whatever else would, considering it's a closed container. So, I think the baby is potentially from an entity from the space in between these different worlds, and I have a feeling that the baby may very well be in some way a representation of us again, but that's kind of up in the air and hard to say. One way or the other, though, the baby seems to have an odd interaction between worlds and seems to be able to prompt either perception between or kind of reconnection with certain realities, and that's something we're going to see again also later on in the thing. But where I was saying in one of my previous videos, or in my previous video, where I feel like that the baby itself may very well be like a health mechanic, a respawn mechanic, a kind of damage offsetting or otherwise kind of negative impact negating kind of entity for us to attach ourselves to. I have a feeling that that's kind of what we're seeing now. And in fact, actually, I've just realised I skipped past something that I meant to. So here we can see more of his other arm, which seems to have CD on it. So I think he's CDC. I think he could be Centre for Disease Control, working for Bridges, an organisation attached to the government. And as a result, I think that may be why he and his colleague, who is wearing the same uniform, were here to transport and escort that Mads Mikkelsen potentially corpse that would allow for them to potentially study it, find out what's going on, find out what these events are and all that kind of thing. Because if you've got reality being shifted and messed around with by people, then I'd say that's a public health risk, wouldn't you? But anyway, let's get back to where we were. So again, the black fluid becomes real. It was muddy here a minute ago, sure, but now the area is being flooded. We've got the armature going haywire. The baby has become aware of stuff that's happening. And these umbilicals, these cords, have started forming everywhere. Worlds are colliding. Things are sliding between. And we'll see more of that again in a minute. Now, unfortunately, he's seeing something that apparently his armature is monitoring as well, and he's deciding to make a lot of noise and potentially only ever make them more aware of where he is. But again, we're also seeing more umbilicals forming over here as the developers are sinking into this area and interacting with it more, causing this crossover between their space, the space of their own players, and this one. So again, here we're having things grab at him from reaching across the void, as it were. And the baby is apparently very important. It seems to be one of a kind, because this seems to be the same one that was being carried by the Guillermo del Toro lookalike character from the previous trailer as well. Okay, so he's going to try and kill himself so that he's not going to be taken. And as soon as he's passed the baby off to Sam, his armature starts to shut down as well. Unfortunately, he kind of gets sabotaged in this regard. But realise now we're not seeing him get pulled under. We're seeing him get pulled up. And so the other players, whatever it is that was reaching through from the other side, not interacting anymore. Something else that is seemingly sky dominant is interfering. And so far we've only seen one set of characters that do that. We've seen the things, the figures that are floating in the sky. We've seen them a bit closer up here in the background every so often. But then also, where did Mads Mikkelsen's character come from? Assuming that the character here was Mads Mikkelsen's character, came from the sky. In which case, to me, that just ties, that ties him together a bit better with what we're saying so far. But the other interesting thing is, we looked away for a matter of seconds, and he just vanished again. The last time we looked away and something was gone and something had reappeared in its place was when we were looking at the figure in the background that disappeared, and then the handprint started walking towards Sam. Now, this is representative of the space that seems to be in between all of these spaces, which is something that Guillermo del Toro has actually talked about in regards to the game's death state, because now everything is floating. And we'll see some more of this in a minute, and why there seems to be this crossover. Now again, if you've noticed, as he's stabbing himself, his little wrist bracelet went from blue and into yellow, and now it's turning red. So it definitely seems to be an in-game kind of health meter of some sort. But okay, so we've got Sam, who's just picked up the baby. So he's no longer the porter for the corpse that they had a moment ago that seems to have completely respawned. He's now looking after the baby. Now, the guy that's floating in the sky, he stabbed himself a lot. He's got low health, sure, but he's not dead yet. And that's something that's important. And we'll get back to that in a minute. Okay, so again, though, we've seen the crabs before, but why, like, he seems to be in the middle of a muddy, almost desert area. Why are there suddenly crabs here? Why is there suddenly sea life here? It's because the sea in between, I'm assuming that these are fish as well, by the way. But the sea in between places is ultimately now feeding through. So you've got the fish and the crabs and the other creatures that are washing through the black liquid into this reality. But realize, again, Sam picks up the baby. He hasn't even connected the baby to himself by the umbilical on the thing. And yet, somehow, that triggers his armature to wake up. And also, he becomes very much aware, suddenly, of this creature. Now, of this figure standing here. Now, realise that a minute ago, we saw the potentially CDC guy firing into the clouds. Mads Mikkelsen's character disappeared, at which point then he starts firing off into empty space. Why? Because he's got the child. The child is connected to him. His armature is working, and so he can see. He can see what this creature is, where it was stood, and how close it was. We couldn't see it. We didn't have the baby. The baby is not just going to be a health mechanic, not just going to be a respawn mechanic. It's also going to be a way of us actually lensing. It's going to be a lens for us to see through this potential veil that is being put up for us. Now, I have a feeling that this other huge figure is also going to be incredibly important to us, and I will point out why when we can see its head. First off, there we go. So we can see it doesn't actually have hands, and it has this really big umbilical there, which could be, which we can't really see where it ends. It could end at its crotch, or it could end at its navel. But it's connected to everything. It's connected to the environment by this huge umbilical. It's connected to certain specific things by all these others. It is connected to a whole load of other things by all of these other umbilicals that seem to connect potentially up to its shoulders and up its back and stuff. This is interacting with everything at once. Now, look at the colour. Look at the colour over the front of this thing's face. Is that not gold and shiny, ladies and gentlemen? I think that this is the true representation of Mads Mikkelsen's character as a developer. Now, this corpse up here, or not corpse, this guy who is still wriggling is the chap that just stabbed himself in the stomach. And he is floating up and up and up. And I have a feeling that this level was his level. Because realise this is also a hand. So hands, incredibly important. He doesn't have hands down here, but he seems to have like three. One here, and one here, opening up to receive our poor CDC guy who is still alive and still screaming. So it's just consumed him, cupped him gently, crushed him. We don't know. But I have a feeling that they set levels. These developers are creating environments, they are creating instances, they are creating situations to test people. Hideo Kojima has talked about the stick and the rope, where a stick is used to kind of drive people apart and keep people at bay, and the ropes are to connect people. I have a feeling that they are the developers are looking in if this is a developer, they are using their connections to test to create more new developers from other realities. Maybe. Again, that's a big jump. But again, this guy has tried to kill himself. They're not interested in dead things. And yet he has now been consumed by this seeming version of Mads Mikkelsen who is controlling this entire situation. And yet he was found wanting, and now the levels reset. There was a game over state for that individual. But now it seemed to have wiped the slate clean. And the interesting thing is, now we're going to go into what Hideo Kojima has suggested is the death state for the game. Which is an ocean. So the first thing that's interesting is that we've got Norman Reedus' character dropped in, this time naked again, but seemingly in a similar state to the state that he was in when we saw him in that first trailer. And he's got some handprints on him, but then another one forms as soon as he dies. I feel like these marks, these handprints on him, aren't just that he's been interacted with or whatever else. I feel like it's a kind of mark saying that he has succeeded in one test. I think that we will start off clean, and each time we die but manage to come back, each time we move forward, each time we progress through this kind of medium environment of this kind of interdimensional sea, we're going to see our character, our Norman, get more and more handprints across his body to suggest how we're growing, how we're passing tests, and so on. So here, though, we've got the umbilicals that are connecting something above to something to the world below, and yet we've slipped through the dark water, seemingly, to one extent or another, because, again, these are the things that were all floating towards the surface. You've got corpses from the guys that have killed themselves. You've got debris and rubble and other bits and pieces. Now, this is the concerning part. If you die too many times, or if you are unable to get from this in-between space to your body, or to a way back to your reality, there are predators here that once you drift out of the water or get elsewhere, they will come to get you. Now, the interesting thing is, if this is the in-between space, where you've got this beer and the origin of the black water that we are seeing as a transmission fluid, as a kind of interdimensional lubricant, as I think I called it before, then you've got potentially up there above the water somewhere is the beach that Norman finds himself washed up on in the very first trailer for Death Stranding that we saw. I feel like this is the middle space, and I feel like if he can find land, if he can find a way to not just drift away into the moors of some Cthulhu-esque nightmare, then that's potentially where he's going to hit that enlightenment moment, that disconnection moment where he's no longer being manipulated, which I think is the first cinematic that we saw where he was disconnected from an umbilical entirely. But then we've got the whales. So again, if the whales are having to fight to stay under the water because gravity is reversed until a certain point, then if a whale goes up, then that would explain it ending up on a beach dead, wouldn't it? And how when the black water or the oil is a kind of interdimensional lubricant between the two trailers 1 and 2 that happen concurrently, almost seemingly, why when the black water or oil rises, then the Death Stranding creatures, or from the beach where Norman is, suddenly appear in kind of World War II Belgium. I think it was Belgium. But there we've got the vehicle again, drifting towards the surface. We've got parts of the debris. And then we've got Norman Reedus' character, Sam, lying where he fell. Again, on his front or on his side, away from the direction that he is, still connected to an umbilical. 2, in fact. So that could be 1 for the baby and 1 for him, or it could just be 2 for him, because they seem to be in pairs in a lot of instances where we're looking into the sky and stuff. But here we've got our dream catcher again. It seems to have been let loose. The gold thing no longer seems quite so shiny, so I don't know if that's important or not. But again, I feel like this has some kind of significance to this being more of a in-between kind of psychic environment where our body is still lying, because everything else is floating away, but our body is still grounded. So when the level is reset, when the developers wash everything clean, the people that are remaining, the people who have passed the test, get to go in, gain their mark on their kind of interdimensional impression of themselves, and then if they manage to get back to their bodies, then their body is safe. He's not moving from down here. He's rooted to terra firma. And I think that's an important thing to take note of with this as a death state, where we've been told that we can regain materials and resources and things like that if we explore around a little bit and then get back to our body. So if this is important, we will then have to try and catch it, try and regain it, and so on before we get back to our body, so that we have it when we get back to the real world. Now again, look at all these little shrimpy things. Like, they're buzzing around our body, they're causing us no harm, but they're here. And so it's a case of going, right, well, if he's underwater and he's down here, first off, there's the baby. There's the baby doll with the cross on its stomach lying there next to us. So that's obviously some kind of impression of us elsewhere. We don't know exactly how it relates, but it's here. But him lying underwater like this, with those umbilicals, the baby, gone. Why? Maybe we'll find out in a minute. But also, he's underwater, he's right at the bottom, he's not floating towards the surface like everything else. His lungs are filled with fluid, as well as all these things. But again, I don't think he's just dropped down here. I think he's spontaneously appeared in this environment. And we'll see some more of that, of why I say that, in a minute. Now, here's the baby again, and the baby is obviously connected to Norman in some way at the moment, but I don't think the baby is in and of itself humanoid. Well, it's obviously humanoid, but I don't think it's terrestrial, because he was clutching it to his chest. Now they have transported to seemingly a different reality, almost. And yet now the baby is inside him. I have a feeling that the baby actually kind of crosses straddles the gap between universes, which is why as soon as he picked up the baby, we could see Mads Mikkelsen's character as a developer, which is what not just as the human that showed up with the metal face. Why now with this superpositional kind of transference from one reality to another, the baby has ended up inside him, because in this reality we know that the baby doesn't have a casing, it doesn't have a shell, like as per the first trailer where they're both, the baby and Sam are lying on the beach. So when the baby's environment has closed and gone dark again, and when that environment has gone dark, when it's black, then that means that the baby is sat in some kind of Schrödinger state where we don't know if it's alive, dead, here or there. It's an interesting little thing that seems to be happening. But also, this baby seems pretty smart. Thanks, pal. And so now the baby has transitioned us back to, or transitioned Norman, who has found the baby, seemingly, back to reality again. and he's clutching the baby to his chest in around the same place as it would have been down his esophagus, or down his throat. And now this is what makes me think that he just appeared there, because we saw all these little shrimpy things that were swimming through the water, just floating around, and he's vomited black, which just seems to be water in that in-between space. This is just water in that sea, but in reality, transitioning between, he's throwing up what he just spontaneously had in his lungs as a result of just popping into existence in that place around these little critters. And also you can see umbilicals leading to some of these critters, not all of them, but to some of them, in the upchuck. But then they're still experiencing reality within the sea. They're not experiencing reality where he is. They're still swimming in that in-between ocean. And so they just continue to float around and swim away. Now, the one thing that I was interested to see was whether or not the... so we found, as we were swimming through the water, from arguably the perspective of Sam, a disembodied Sam, he swam through the Dreamcatcher. And so the Dreamcatcher is now reconnected to his gear again. You are able to pick up items and bring them back to yourself in that space. Little Homo Ludens figure attached to the thing, which I just saw and I thought was quite cool. But now he's got tears running down his face. Now this could be there could be a lot of different reasons. I feel like this might actually be the first time that Sam here has picked up the baby and become more aware of what's out there. Maybe it's because he's now remembering that the baby gave him the thumbs up before kicking him back into his body. Who knows? But the tears running down his face, because again, we actually see him shed a tear now, even though he's completely fine, and his expression doesn't seem to suggest that he should be crying. There seems to be an element of almost maybe purging, because we cry when we're trying to remove irritants as much as we're doing anything else. So I don't know what the significance of the crying actually has, but we've seen it in like a couple of instances now, where in the first trailer he was crying but no tears were coming. And now in this trailer, he's not crying, but the tears are happening. And it seems to be part of that transitional back and forth. And water is very much connected to it. But now, again, we've got these 5 figures. And they're not... You've got all these umbilicals everywhere, but you've got these 5 figures floating in the sky. And I think that this one in the middle might be Mads Mikkelsen's character again. Just from the way it stood, because it looks like it's the only one with its arms like crossed across its chest, as we have seen him either holding a weapon, or as we saw him now, where he had one arm down and one arm like up across his chest to signal with. You know, I feel like that may very well be him, and him as developer, and these others, who knows. But then the last thing in the trailer that's really interesting to me is as we scroll up, as we pan up and look down into the crater, this is the crater that seemed to be caused as a result of that huge Mads Mikkelsen alike blowing itself up. And if you look, you've got this big black imprint at the bottom filled with black fluid, and it seems to have 1, 2, 3, possibly 4, maybe 5 over here digits to it. A huge-ass handprint from the developer. Sorry to cut you off there, Sam/Norman. But, so this was the playfield. He was the only one that actually passed the test. Game over. Playfield was destroyed. One large handprint left as a result of the situation. But again, what did the water do? Being through the water... going through that momentary difference You got projected into the future. This is after the fact by seemingly a considerable amount of time, considering that there are umbilicals and things, but there's very little other debris, remnant, anything else. You've got the black discoloration in the mud. You've got the black down there. You've got the figures, but again, you've like all of this up here that's been blasted out seems very clean, like almost conspicuously so. And it all seems rather dry as well, when not so long ago it was pouring with rain. So it's going to be interesting to see how far each time we die jumps us, and whether or not, if we stay in and collect everything in that in-between space, it's going to mean that we jump further forward and further forward and further forward for the longer that we stay in there, considering there seems to be a disconnect between the amount of time in the water and the amount of time in reality, which again, time in the water, both speaking literally and figuratively, because that's how the rain interacts as well, and that's why the rain seems to be speeding up time.
A bang which gave rise to life as we know it. And then...
Yeah, see, so we've got 1 digit, 2 digit, 3 digit, another digit that seems to come round here a little bit with those there maybe, and then this one over here. So you've got the like 4 fingers, big palm, thumb. So a right hand that's been pressed. And again, the first handprint that we saw was a right hand on the bonnet of that Jeep.
Came the next explosion. An explosion that will be our last.
Okay, so apparently this explosion that's coming will be our last. Why? Or maybe because after this we're disconnected from reality to such an extent, of our own reality to such an extent that we no longer have to worry about that. There's this transcendental quality to potentially what's going on. Or it could be it's as dire as Sam/Norman makes it out to be, and it will be the end of all things. But you know, we'll have to see. It's interesting. I hope you enjoyed the commentary and the ideas here, guys. Otherwise, though, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the video later on. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, then please drop us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more. And I'll see you in the video later on. Take care.